Very good. Welcome, everyone, to this event. It's the ePI Type 4 event to go over Vulcan's new update on ePI Type 4. I'm Filippo Napoli. I'm the Vulcan PMO lead and technical director. These slides were created with the help of Craig Anderson, who's the Vulcan project lead for both ePI and Apex. He's actually going to join us a little later, so you'll see him if you have questions for him directly. If you can please proceed to the next slide. Very good. Thank you. Those are the 8 strong individuals who helped us with this effort on ePI in general. Thank you a lot to the Swedish Medical Products Agency. We have Kim and Marcus, always faithful with us. You have individuals from Pfizer. We have Adam and Philippe. I wouldn't even attempt to pronounce your organization name, Adam. Then we have Nicholas and, of course, Craig Anderson, which I said is going to join us a little later. Thank you all for your input into this AG. We're going to start by giving a quick intro on HL7. HL7 was founded in 1987, and in 1994, so 7 years later, it became ANSI accredited standards developing organization. It's known as the creator of fire standards. HL7 Vulcan is one of the 8 accelerators that you have at HL7. Our mission is to build a global community that accelerates interoperability across clinical research and clinical care through the adoption of FHIR. And we have participants in consortia, SDOs, pharma, regulatory, government, academia, and implementers and vendors. Next slide, please. The Vulcan IGs is meant to be, before I talk about Vulcan IGs, I should probably explain, you probably hear about IGs, it stands for implementation guides. It's basically what we use to define our use cases in FHIR. At Vulcan, in this case for ePI, ours are more focused on the common technical aspects. So actually, how do we encode to the section? How do we encode the images or the tables? While the local IGs from regulators might define things like local terminology and local business rules. We have a sort of a parent-child relationship between our IGs at Vulcan and the regulators, meaning it's not binding, legal binding. It's more of an informal agreement, handshake agreement. And you have regulators, for example, in Jordan, who adopts it directly as is. And then you have others like EMA and FDA that they use the IG, and then they have their local variants on how they implement it. Next slide, please. Okay, I don't see. Did you skip too many slides, or is this? Do you mind going back one?
I don't think so. This is what I got from Craig. Which slide would you like to see?
That is fine. I'll continue. So I was going to talk about APIs. I'll just give the what I remember from the slides that used to be there. So basically, ePI, initially we had everything under one ePI, but then we broke down everything into 4 ePI types. We had some slides that we will make sure they make it into the artifacts when we, after the meeting, you can download. But it shows the differences between ePI type 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it shows also the elements that were partially built in type 2. For example, the contraindications, they were partially built on type 2, and they were fully developed in type 3. So it's very good to see. And what we're trying to say in that slide is that we offer all these different types, and so regulators can pick which ePI type they more fits their needs.
And further definition of this will be given by Marcus, who will also distinguish between especially type 3 and type 4. So more details and also a couple of slides will follow on this.
Perfect. And this was a kind of wrap-up slide to tell you if you'd like to get involved with the ePI project or like to learn more about it. If you follow the QR code at the bottom, the website is hl7vulcan.org. All you do is you go under our projects header, and it says ePI electronic product information. When you click on it, just click the blue link on the top of the page. It's also at the bottom of the page, and it would all we need is your name and email, and we will subscribe you to the project, and then you can get updates like upcoming meetings and events we have. I believe this was the last slide.
Thank you, Filippo. This was a very nice introduction to show that we actually have had this global group. We have been working on timings suitable for Canada, Australia, Europe, etc. So together we've formed this vision of deep granularity for electronic product information. We call it ePI Type 4 because there already exists Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. Mentioning this, I would like to say that today's webinar is about a granular vision ePI Type 4, where we'll describe why it's granular, why we need granularity. However, it's not to be confused with the EMA, European Commission, and National Competent Authorities Initiative, which is actually going live in December this year. So there's been a draft roadmap available on the EMA webpage, which will be updated accordingly. And the implementation of a semi-structured format, so-called ePI Type 1, is actually called in a couple of months. So platform is built, guidances are there, training videos, and a workshop was held last week about ePI EMA style. So we'll give you granularity in 90 minutes. What do we mean? We are moving from documents, paper documents, PDF documents, to data. We will discuss deep granularity, including multi-dimensions and multi-levels. And what I mean with multi-dimension is information elements may be categorized as type of information, what kind of information that element is illustrating. It could be an interaction, but also applying metadata on that interaction, such as applicable for a certain population, a certain age group, for example, and also relationship with corresponding data elsewhere in the document, but that should be read in conjunction. Information elements may also be categorized as a type of information, such as interaction. And what kind of interaction? Is it food interaction, drug-drug interaction, mechanism action, etc. We will explain how with a couple of examples, and we will show you the instruction we have made up, which will later on turn into a proper IG and a profile. A draft profile is already published on the HL7 webpage. Further on, we will have definitions and code examples, practical implementation, and we will end up with questions and discussions. So this is how it all began. We started up with QRD template. QRD is the Quality Review of Documents group within the EMA, defining product information assessment templates and guidances. So here we have the summary of product characteristic, the SMPC. We took it and applied some color-coded fields. And then we built an SMPC in Lego, where we have the name block, strength block, form block. We have standard sentences, etc. So we wanted more or less going from an unsorted box of Lego, which could be a PDF text, onto structured data in colors and sizes. So in 2018, we actually invented the color coding model, and that same year, EMA formulated the need for electronic structured product information. We started to sort out what was later agreed upon with EMA, the Commission, and National Competent Authorities, what is called key principles. 2 years later, we turned the color coding model into a proof of concept model where we had the full granular ePI properties and functionalities within an editor so that we actually could create an SMPC according to color codes fields. Then we had a user acceptance test with industry about this proof of concept. And then in 2023, EMA turned out in their ePI Type 1 pilot. And that was the start for what is going to go live in 2026. The full granular ePI, what we call ePI Type 4, was actually started in a Vulcan meeting in 2024. In 2025, I'm sure you all know about the ePI Type 1 implementation in Jordan. And today we will talk about the ePI Type 4 implementation guide. This is what we had for requirements and why we need ePI. So we would like to say that the current state of product information exchange today is like printing PDFs of streaming content. That's quite hard, that you could imagine. It's static, it's disconnected, and it's quickly outdated. In PDFs or Word format, product information remains locked in documents. And they are not easy to maintain, not easy to reuse, and impossible to integrate in real time. So therefore, documents in a certain order to be proposed by applicant, we are obeyed by law, by the directive or the guidances, and we have to evaluate it and to actually read and assess in a certain order with a certain content. And then it has to be authorized by a regulator and then published for the end users. On the contrary, ePI is a public health priority because it will expand the dissemination. And that means that ePI could actually be used for individual adaptation or situation adapted needs. And these were the criteria when we developed ePI Type 4. As I said, we started with the color coding model, but then we had to turn it into something formal. So ePI Type 4 transforms product information for medicinal products into a fully structured, FHIR-based model where narrative text is coded with controlled terminologies. That could be, for example, integrated coding into SNOMED, CT, MEDRA, or other coded vocabularies. Then in ePI Type 4, we decompose into atomic components. Please remember we have the Lego blocks in different sizes and colors. And then we link everything directly to machine-readable resources. That's ePI Type 4 explained in other words. That would enable optimized and harmonized creation for the applicant, where they can use data retrieved from their controlled sources. They can use healthcare interoperability and also for the end user to be interoperable with other systems and for personalized adaptation. What we haven't done is that we haven't adopted our IG to, let's say, QRD template or the US SPL or something else. We try to get an instruction to be agnostic. And with that, we mean that each respective user have to further develop EMA EPI Type 4 IG or FDA EPI Type 4 IG to be adapted for a specific region, a specific product information template. And also out of scope is that we understand that to be able to create an EPI according to ePI Type 4, there would be a need for vendors to develop editor interface and also end users applications. So we are not inventing apps for the end users. We're not inventing a tool where you can create an ePI Type 4. We're sort of writing instructions so that that could be the result in the end. We imagine that ePI Type 4 would be good for end users such as healthcare professionals, patients, pharmacists, that means downstreams, and they could use the ePI for individual information extractions. Here are some examples. The doctor would like to have a ping in the system when the dosage or handling instructions have been changed for any of the medicines in his or her list. Or the patient would like to have a list of non-prescription medicines suitable for me when I have a certain indication, I know my age, gender, and intolerances. All this could be ticked in a box in an app, and then you can get a proper list of suitable medications. Or at the pharmacy, where the pharmacist needs communication support when he or she talks to the customer. So he or she could ask the system, please give me applicable warnings to communicate to the patient, given this medicine name, and patient information such as age, gender, and intolerances. Personal information would not be stored in the system, but it could be used to retrieve suitable information for each situation. And we also imagine that ePI type 4 would be suitable for creators and for regulators. Coding and retrieve of data would minimize administrative burden that would then allow us to use more time to evaluate the content and to input data from studies, etc. So the creators could reduce duplication across different markets or across different strength for a certain medication. It could also enable automated updates and interoperability with their data sources or other eHealth data sources. For the evaluators, the regulators, we could have a data-driven oversight and automated validation. And that could also enable automated updates and dissemination of the later on published information. So here is the first page of our IG. We take documents to data, and we include atomic coded information concepts linked to FHIR resources. And this is a step-by-step what you should do when you create an ePI according to ePI type 4. And we will explain these steps in wordings and in a code file. The editor vendors, those who develop an interface for easy creation of ePI type 4, they would need the IG because they would need what should be the results. How should the interface be developed for the creator to create a proper ePI type 4? And then for the ePI creators, they will also need the IG so that they could understand the level of granularity and to write further region-specific IGs. Because as I said, the IG is written agnostic, very general. So deep, detailed, specific concepts would be for the next step to write specific IGs. And this is the index I showed on last slide, and it has to be turned into a proper profile that can be downloaded. And here I made the part of entry because that's very important in the ePI type 4. Entry will be further explained by Marcus. So this is a problem. We have legacy product information. It would be very nice if we could create all product information from beginning, but that's not the case. So today we have texts where we have separate indications. For example, we have one indication, we apply the clinical user definition indication 1. We have the second indication in a separate sentence. We apply the clinical user definition indication 2. In the IG, we also include example of where we have a combined sentence so that you actually could apply the CUD in the CUD 1 and CUD 2 in the same sentence. Because both examples exist and we have to handle all types of text. We have about 50,000 documents to be transformed, so we have to foresee different examples. This is a complex one. We actually have a CUD indication 3, that is pain. But this is a an oncology medicine, so it's severe pain. We can either entry reference of severity, that is severe, or we can have plain narrative text, mild to moderate, because it maybe is not that detailed that we know from studies that it should be mild to moderate. That's just sort of a human eye suitable text, so it might not need the reference. Or we can actually code to, let's say we have severe pain as a separate code in SNOMED CT, that would form CUD indication 4. So we have these different examples. Then I also need to mention narratives, because we have different kind of narratives. Narratives is some kind of text that could be entered into the document or the product information in different types. We have something that is just authored, just entered, typed manually. We have generated display text. For example, if you have an underlying code, you could derive sort of an automated generated text to be displayed. We have value-based, that is short text fields that can be linked to dose amounts such as milligrams or frequencies. And we have sort of standard sentences, annotated narrative text, that the whole sentence could actually be taken from a specific vocabulary. Those of you who are convenient with SPOR database, the RMS reference management services, there we have a couple of standard phrases that could be used, and that is also mentioned as examples in the IG. And then we have some plain narrative text that actually doesn't mean anything. It's just there for human understanding. And well, it's there, so we have to handle it, but it might not be applicable for newly created APIs. And again, some more colors. Once the vendors, they have developed editor interfaces, it could look like this. This is a view taken from EMA PLM portal, where you have the possibility to create an SMPC. The view is taken from Microsoft Word, where I change the bold types, italics, underlined, etc., with different information categories. So this is actually the interaction chapter. You have the SMPC text, and then you could drag and drop each information category to the actual part of the text that you would apply the information category for. This is just an illustration, just to make you see how it's illustrated, but it could be in many different types depending on interfaces. This is another model. Drag and drop again, what kind of information category you would like to apply. And this is one that we actually used in 2022 in our proof of concept, where we actually had, you could click on the side effects, you got a certain amount of Medro codes, you choose one, and the correct term is displayed. Just illustrations could look like in many other ways. And we also introduced a couple of concepts. So a new thing with ePI type 4 is that we have composition. That's because we have to deal with documents. We have concepts. That is to be read as chapters in the QRD templates, like chapter 1, chapter 4, clinical particulars. And then those sections that we used to, we call them domains, or we apply domain to what we normally read as sections, like section 4.1, therapeutic indications, section 4.3, contraindications. That we call a domain. And a section could be further divided into subsections or paragraphs, so we call these topics. And the topics could include domains and also subdomains. And then we have those very, very small atomic components that could be a single word or a very small sentence. Those atomic components, they're also structured. They could be a narrative, but they could also be linked to a section or have a relation to another information. So this is in colors. You have the SMPC, composition, that's the template, concepts, the chapters, domains, sections, and information within these sections, we call them topics. Here's another example from the contraindication section in the package leaflet, how we describe atomic components. Do not take Paracet if you're allergic to paracetamol, wheat starch, or magnesium stearate. Paracet is our fictive product. We have taken this product and we have created an SMPC within a code file just to have as an example. And this single sentence could be divided into these atomic components. What decides that it's actually a contraindication is the part do not take. If you change do not take to please take, the change or the meaning would be very different. So do not take is linked as being a contraindication. Paracet is sort of a placeholder for the trade name. And if you're allergic, that's a condition. Paracetamol is linked to active substance. And then we have the excipients. They are also substances, but they are assigned the role that they are excipients. So all atomic components, it has to be read and linked to conjunction with other related information. And the underlying material that we have to understand the corresponding QRD template sections to the left in colors and how they are mapped to fire resources for later transformation into proper IG. And this was how we discovered what kind of resources did we need. So this was actually developed in November last year. It has to be completed, and we take this as a rough first map when deciding what kind of fire resources, fire elements, and subdomains we're going to use. I have to say that a resource actually is something which property is to be applied on one or several information parts. It's not that once you've used the resource, it's engaged. So the property of a resource could be used as many times as you want to. That's because of a question I got, so I'm explaining this. So please, Marcus, if you could give us some definitions and examples.
Yes, let's look at the different types again. Just a short, brief look at the four. As we already talked about, but we have the type 1, of course, that's mainly structured with the headings, and the narrative and the content is just plain narrative. With of course tables and images and so forth. Type 2 and 3, then you add some sort of coded data. In the 2, you add the identification, and in 3 you add clinical information of some kind, indication or dosing. But it's outside the narrative in both cases. So the new important thing for type 4 is that you add more granularity, and then you connect this information to the narrative. And of course, type 4 is just a continuation of the type. So if you have some of the earlier, you can just build upon existing information. So, and as I said, this is highly granular and integrated. So you don't add as previously, yeah. But I think in the next slide here.
Better connection now without the camera on. And I hope you can see this screen where we have the ePI type 1 and 4 definitions. So what Marcus would do here, we have now reorganized the slides, and he will explain the difference between type 1, which is the one that EMA at the moment will use for go live in December. Then we have type 2 and type 3. They are quite similar using clinical use definition. And then Marcus will explain the extremely value of type 4, which is adding further granularity with wiring or linking between narrative text and FHIR resources. So I change in the next slide. Or did you want to say anything more about this first one, or should I just change the next slide?
I think this is fine.
Yeah,
sorry,
sorry
earlier.
for the, sorry for the delay.
It got a mix up with the version, so we're going from here. Yeah, I use this screen instead, I think. Yeah, as I said previously, it's just building on the existing concept, and we are adding new features, and this is the extensive information, and it's more granular, and it's integrated with the narrative. That's the basic thing. This is just repeating what I said earlier. So, but the main issue is that, as I said, 2 and 3, they have coding, but it's not linked to the narrative. That's the main issue here. So, when you're linking to the coding here in the narrative, to the topics as we define it, there is a couple of different ways you can do that. We have this placeholder tag that Kim mentioned for the atomic types, name and conditions, smaller elements. And then you can link certain text blocks. Just you anchor the coding, and then you can also link to position, the composition. And in some cases, you just generate the narrative from the coding. So for side effects, for example, we have manufactured a solution where you generate the data. So it's presented in that way. And all of this use basically the same technique with the span tags with metadata in the background. So.
Oh, this is my
this is a very old picture. I used it several times. It's not you shouldn't think of this as the different types. It's more an illustration of granularity in general, where you go from right to from left to right and just add more and more granularity. I think type 1 could be somewhere between 1 and 2, and number 3 is sort of type 4. But this is an old illustration that you shouldn't think of the type really. But
and you usually say that the box to the left is somewhat wrong, and that's on purpose, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. italics here, that's just your formatting narrative, and that's, you should never do that. So you can't see the structure here really. So
this is what happens if you have formatting concept within the structure. You might think that just when you see it for your human eye, it will be visible in the presentation, but you won't, because you have different side sheets and different presentation views, and that's why it comes to, you have to structure according to proper sections, proper paragraphs.
Yeah, precisely. And in the middle, the different boxes here, you can view that as a section, some kind, and you nest it further and further. And in number 3 here, you can see that you have connected different types of metadata as population or indication in the first paragraph there. And so you have this concept of linking metadata to the different sections. So this is just, it's a little bit out of place, but just to show you can go, maybe you have type 5 letter and just move on and fragment deeper and deeper. That's the plan. So yeah, and then we have some additional features beyond this basic concept. So we tried to add coding for standard sentences and paragraphs. And also you can have the same concept with IDs for some different resources that in regulatory aspects. Perhaps a standard approved text from PRAC or some sort of that kind of information. And also just variation IDs if you when you try to evaluate different variations in parallel, that could be very helpful for Kim and me.
So do you mean actually, Marcus, that I might have variation 1 within the text with a timetable to end up tomorrow, and at the same time I can actually assign variation 2 with a timetable within a month, and I can actually make variation 2 to be invisible or not published? So that's the aim. Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and we, as Kim mentioned, we have tried to put this in action with this highly imaginary product called Paraset, with paracetamol, the old product. So, and this is just to experiment and test the concept. It's part of the consultation, but you shouldn't view it as a finished product. It's just to experiment around and we should mention that we have used this extension from Gavitat Health. That's it works, but that's not a requirement. We can discuss the solution for that, but that's used quite a lot in the file to make this connection between the coding and the narrative parts. So and we put it in Word so you can just comment on it.
And links to this file and the IG and all the things that we would be happy to receive comments on, you will get a link to at the end of the presentation.
Yes. And below where you see a very rudimentary file bundle, the structure there, the composition, this extension data top, and then the narrative, the structure of the document, and then the coded data at the end. Just some very short examples from the file here. This is another kind of color coding. So in blue we have the ID for the coding, and as you can see, it's linked to the whole short section here, the paragraph, the P tag, and within the section you have these two substances, paracetamol and propofol, that's also linked to a resource in red here. It should be for paracetamol as well, but yeah, very, very brief. And the use of entry, as we mentioned, that's within the composition, and then the clinical use definitions and substance definition is separate referenced. So it's a sequence of linking. And if you add the extension, you have another, but it's just a chain of connections to facilitate this. Yeah. And this is just a clinical use definition code example. I want to walk you through this just to show it. Yeah. And this is also an example that you saw it earlier, also in Kim's presentation. Just to remind everybody that you never interact with the codes yourself. You always have an editor of some kind to work through with this kind of drop-down menus, and then you can connect parts of the narrative, as we mentioned earlier. Just an illustration. This is similar. This one has the extension that we don't really support, but it works. So in blue, you have the link to the extension, and the yellow is just the enclosed regular narrative. And in this case, you just have the connection to a standard sentence. So it's a variant of the same section. Just to mention that we have some issues you can look at in this test file. It's 5,500 rows of code, so we don't expect you to analyze in detail, but if you could look at these 3 sections and 4.1, 4.2, and 4.8, that all have a couple of variants in the file. In some cases, it's better to use one solution, and yeah, so just have a look at those 3. And of course, the wiring model is still up for debate. There are several possible use cases there, so feel free to chip in and suggest. Yeah.
So what will happen now is that we will give you links to the IG and illustrative code files and the underlying material for mapping QRD template sections to file resources. And we would be more than happy to receive comments during the summer. We will compile everything, improve, and then later on have it formally approved. So just to dig into this massive material, we would be happy if you could take these 4 questions to start with, whether you could come up with other solutions or just to make you think. So just read how these questions in mind. And we will also hear an interesting presentation from Niklas Janich, how to implement and to use this ePI type 4 in practice. So please, Niklas, if you could share your screen.
Hello, everyone. So thanks for the opportunity to present. So I will now share my own screen. And I do hope you can see a green slide. Can someone quickly tell me if you can? So Zoom is always 2 clicks. So Teams 1 click. So can you see my slide? Can someone give me?
Yes, it's turned up. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I was I just want to put like an industry perspective, but also patient perspective to this. So of course, we've seen a lot of details and ways on how to do it in practice, and we always need to remember if we're looking at digital, there's code and coding elements in the background which are required to actually make things interoperable and work together. But of course, the ultimate goal is to bring product information to patients in the best possible way, and also to healthcare professionals, because they also need this information when they decide on medicines, when they interact with patients. And this is what we're essentially taking up with the ePI type 4. So it's really, for me, one of the key fundamentals to drive this forward. So I have a very short slide set, just looking at the vision, the foundation, and then look at how does this see in action. So again, this is from a pharma company perspective. So ultimately, and this is really kind of going back to one of the key goals, is that ePI type 4 will actually enable us to personalize product information. I mean, this is something that I've wanted to do for many, many years, because essentially a lot of patients often don't read the patient information. It's too long. They don't see what's relevant for them. And with type 4, for the first time ever, we'll really have the possibility to filter it down to the essence, especially if we connect it to other healthcare data. So the basic purpose of product information is to tell people on how to safely and effectively use a medicine. And as I said, it's often very hard to find for people in the current setup of patient information. So even if you put it on the web, it's still a lot of information. So essentially, you see all of it right now, and this is already looking at this more granular aspect to say we have an indication, it has a coding, so we can make it machine readable. So if the healthcare professional makes a prescription and there's an ICD-10 code linked, I can actually tell, okay, that's this indication 1 and not the indication 2. But then it's also about, how do I tell them what is new, what has changed? Because this is something that we can actually do with type 4 and say, hey, there's this new contraindication, and I see in your health record that you have this disease, so you should know about this. So that's one element that type 4 can bring to the table. And the other piece is, if you connect it to e-prescription and e-health record data, you can actually use this to filter down to the relevant pieces, so that you say, okay, I know it's only indication 1 that the patient is getting, and with his conditions, there's one contraindication to consider. In that case, he gets 1 dosage and there's 1 interaction. And this is really one of the key pieces that we can achieve with this data-driven way of describing electronic product information. And this is, for me, one of the key drivers to do it, because we know there's a lot of mismedication, over-medication in the healthcare system. And I think a lot of it is really related to people just not using the medicines correctly, or prescriptions made without knowledge about certain information. And I think this is something that we can do with type 4. But of course, and I think you've seen that in the first part of the product of the presentation, that it's in the back, it's tremendously complicated. So we need to ensure that the overall way of how we do it is actually feasible from an end-to-end process perspective. So pharma companies, health authorities, healthcare professionals, patients, or healthcare system more generally can actually process all of this. And it's still a way to go, but I think now with the IG being put out there, we have an excellent starting point to get this rolling. And the point is, getting this rolling. This has actually started many years back with IDMP, because IDMP already put out this vision to say we want to communicate product information in a more data-centric way. And I think now with electronic product information type 4, we are picking this up and say, okay, how can we actually get this out of an IDMP database into the hands of patients? And I think that's something where we now have a good momentum, seeing that EMA and the NCAs in Europe are working on making the transition to electronic product information in the first place. Even if we start with type 1, this is really the foundation that we go to the machine readable format in the first place, and then we can scale it up as we move along. And also the EMA is working on IDMP, so also this pool piece is moving. And I think at some point we would see all of this coalescing into one framework. And with FHIR, we have the implementation framework to say, how do we get these concepts from data model into practice? And so the pieces, the foundation is there. And now the next step is really to get this going in the real world. And here the team has built the foundation to say, we now have something that we can start working off, and we can share something with the public, get comments, get implementers to really put products out there to make this happen in the real world. And if we now look at it from a pharma company perspective, actually would like to get to a model where I say we don't have to do all of this work, all of the details that you've seen in the presentation from Kim and Markus on top, but it's part of our normal process, so that we have type 4 embedded in a labeling data pipeline, essentially, to say our work and labeling in a pharma company is to process raw data that is coming in our clinical trials at the beginning, but also during the product life cycle in many different manifestations. But it's always, we need to take data and transform this into language that healthcare professionals and patients can understand, and that helps them in the day-to-day of clinical practice. So this is really the core job that we're doing. And instead of now updating documents and just working on a narrative level, we actually are now aiming to say, why don't we create these data pieces from the start? So when we create a new indication, it's not I update a document, but it's I create a new indication. I have this object that I can put into an ePI type 4, and it's something that a downstream system, a downstream stakeholder can actually process, because it's a data element. So for me, it's really the vision that we operate in this way from the get-go, and then also from a transition point of view, it's pretty easy. So if we can do it on the industry side, health authorities can accept it on their side, and we push it into the healthcare system like this, then we have this end-to-end data flow that brings all of those tremendous benefits. But of course, again, it's a significant transition. But I think now with the ePI type 4, we have the backbone and the framework to do it. And this is where also that aspect of data-driven submissions come in. So this is, we compile it in this way, the health authorities receive it in this way, and we can interact on that way. So we talk about an indication, a contraindication, an interaction, and exchange not only some piece of text, but also the data connected to that text. And this is then ultimately opening up the door for the vision that I've shared on my first slide. And now to just make it a little bit more practical. from an implementer's perspective. So now this is what you see in a Word SMPC, and it's text. It's just text. And you can put this text in a data-driven format to say, hey, it's a section, but it's still a blob of text. And you cannot differentiate that it's actually 3 indications. So you can color code this, but then it's still not data, it's color coded text. It won't help you. So you need to get this into a data structure. So what we've done on our end is to say, let's maintain all of those different indications as separate data points. So the boxes that we have in the indication section are actually dedicated data sets, and they can carry their own metadata. So we can say this piece of data is related to the MEDRA term for interstitial lung disease. And we have an intended effect, which is treatment. So this is associated to that data point. And then you can, of course, export this into an XML file and say, the first thing, the yellow one, that is a separate indication from the other 2. And it carries a MEDRA code, which is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And we even have an ID here that refers to sport, so we can even call it out in a machine readable way. And I mean, this is just an illustration in terms of how this ePI type 4 future can look like from a company content management perspective. So we can put it in a way that our end users can work with that without being, software developers and coders who can edit an XML. This is nothing that we want for our users. They should have something that they can actually operate in their day-to-day. But in the back, something like this needs to come out, because this is only what the machine on the side of the health authority or on the side of an electronic health record understands. So this is what we need to bridge to say there needs to be something that we can work with, but in the back, it's all machine readable stuff. And just to kind of take a step back to say, okay, Europe is Europe, but as a globally operating pharma company, we actually are operating in multiple countries. Kim mentioned Jordan, who are implementing also ePI at the moment. So what we want to do, so this is kind of the path that we've been following in our company, is to say, let's just work and fragmented content from the get-go in every region in the world. And if we have this ability to tag metadata to these content pieces, then we have what we need basically to produce these more advanced types of product information. And then we can reuse these pieces in all sorts of labeling documents. And if you have the right granularity, then it doesn't matter if you have a different template, because in the end, you're managing your content pieces. An indication is an indication, independent if you're in the US, in Europe, or in Jordan. It's still an indication. There may be slightly different wording, but also the coding will be exactly the same in many cases, because non-small cell lung cancer is non-small cell lung cancer, right? And this is kind of the intention, to say we manage everything in this kind of structure, and then we can export a FHIR API with the European implementation guide. We can create an IDMP message if we need to bring this labeling related IDMP data to an IDMP repository. We can also do the same for the US and have this FHIR export done for a USPL, the US PI. And you can, of course, also export SPL, so the current format in the US. So we wanted ultimate flexibility to say, wherever we are, we follow a certain pattern, and that enables us to do all sorts of granular outputs that we can adapt to local implementation guides, essentially. And that was the perspective from an industry side, looking at what is the vision for ePI and how we are tackling the aspect of implementation and processing in the company. And with that, I would give back to the others.
So thank you very much, Nicholas, for your perspective of practical use of the ePI type 4, I realized actually that it seems that you, me, and Marcus are saying the same thing. I'm happy to. When we discussed this before, we meant the same thing, but I also heard the same thing. So I hope that the participants also heard the same things, and that you got some ideas and clarifications about what ePI type 4 could be. So now that we have this proposal for draft instructions, draft implementation guide, illustrated by the code file example and also the fire mapping, we would be very happy to receive comments to improve the documents. And if you have other questions, we'll try to answer or take notes. So please.
In the chat.
Well, if we don't have any questions, thank you to all the presenters. Great job. As a reminder, we will add the presentation files within the invite itself. If you go, probably within 2 days, we'll add the link at the bottom of the invite. So there's going to be a red button. You click and you'll see the recording and a list of the slides. So you can review them at your leisure. Thank you all.